Great, so let's review. We have a VPC that has a subnet inside. We have connected the VPC to internet using internet gateway and configured it in the route table. And we have also created a security group that opens port 22 and port 8080 that we will later configure for our EC2 instance. Now the question is, what else or what other configuration or what other information do we actually need in order to create an EC2 instance? So I'm going to write the configuration for creating an AWS EC2 instance. And let's see what information is still missing. So first of all, resource AWS instance is the resource type. And let's call it my app server. And there are two required attributes for AWS instance. The first required attribute is AMI. AMI is the image which the EC2 server will be based on. This is the operating system image, right? So if we go back to our console and let's look for EC2. And by the way, this is actually a new user interface of AWS, maybe experimental actually. So right now there are no running instances. So here, if we do launch instance, the very first selection we have to make is to choose an Amazon machine image. And as I said, this is the operating system that the server will start with. So we can choose between distributions of Linux and Windows. And the AMI that we're going to use for our web server is Amazon Linux, which is optimized for working with Amazon and its services. So this is also the one that we're going to use in this one. So the AMI, the value of this AMI attribute is actually the ID of the image. So basically this part right here, right? So each AMI has this ID, which starts with AMI dash, and then comes the ID, and each one has a unique one, and this is the value that we need. Now note that this ID can actually be different across regions. So in your region, the ID might be actually different for the same image, for the same machine image. So keep that in mind. And also this can be dynamic. So this can actually change when the new image gets released. And that means that if we hard code this value, if we copy this and basically just hard code it as a string here, we may need to change it later when the ID isn't correct anymore. So instead, we actually want to dynamically set it, or rather get this value from AWS programmatically from Terraform and then set it as a value here. So how do we do that? You know that in order to fetch the existing resources to basically query the data from AWS, we use not resource, but rather data type, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a data and we're going to call it AWS AMI. And we want this image to be the latest Amazon Linux 2 image. So this one right here, but with the latest version. So let's call it latest Amazon Linux image. So instead of hard coding it here, we're gonna query it from AWS. So first attribute is going to be most recent equals true. We want to get the most recent image version. The second one will be owners. So what is the owner's value for an image? Let's go back, and here you see this is just a quick start, but you have different tags here, right? You have AWS Marketplace, where different companies have created their own images, right? So you can actually browse these ones, and then you have owner is basically the one that released this image or who makes this image available in the marketplace. Then you have community AMIs, which are for different operating systems with different distributions, a whole list here. And I'm actually gonna open a new tab and let's go to EC2. And in EC2 view here, you have images and AMIs in this menu here. And if we click inside, and let's do public images, we have loads of them, right? And the way to search or see the owner is basically in this owner field. And for example, if I input this ID here and search for it, there you go, we have owner field that says Amazon. And because this is the image that I want to be using, this is basically the same one as here. This is the name and this is ID. So this tells me the owner of the image. So this is the value that I want to enter in here. And this is a list, so I can have multiple owners specified here. I can also have my own images, right? Again, if I go back, you have my AMI section here. For example, if you create an EC2 instance from this image and then you make changes on top of that, like install some tools, etc., and just prepare it for your own needs, you can actually create your own image out of it and then reuse that for other deployments. And then you're going to have them in this section. And you can reference them here as well. In this case, you will be the owner. So we have the owners, which is Amazon. And then we have the filters. So filter in data, basically filter blocks, are what lets you define the criteria for this query. So basically you can tell Amazon, give me the most recent images that are owned by Amazon that have the name that starts with this string, for example. Or we can say that starts with this string or this value and that ends with this. And we don't care whatever is inside in case there are multiple images like that and we don't care which one will be taken. In fact, I'm going to choose Amazon Linux here and you see that we have two images that have the same prefix, same suffix, just the in between is different, right? This value here is different. So we can actually do that in filter. So I'm going to copy that part, and in filter we have name and values attributes. For each filter we have the name attribute, which basically is referencing which key we want to filter on. In our case, this is the name of the image. So we want to filter or set criteria for a name. So we're going to specify name. In this case, it's called the same, not to be confused. And we have the values. So for this attribute or this column, basically, what values we want to filter on. And as I said, we want the value to be, this is a list, so we can have multiple values. And we want that to start with this string right here. And then we want something in between. We don't really care. It's a regular expression for that. And then we want it to end with this string. And this will basically give us all the images that match images whose name matches this regular expression. In this case, it will be those two. And then give me the most recent of those images. And we can actually define as many filters as we want. In fact, we can do the second one. And again, we have name for the attribute we want to filter on. Let's go back and let's say we want the virtualization type to be filtering on this time. I'm gonna copy that actually. And the attribute is going to be like this. So name, virtualization type, And values, again, we have a list, and the value is HVM. So I have another criteria. And this way you can add multiple filters from whatever data you are querying from AWS. And this will be it. This will basically give us the most recent Amazon image that matches this name. And this way we don't have to worry about hard coding and updating the value manually. It will be dynamically provided for us. So now we can reference that AMI from the data using data, the name of the data, or the type of the data, and the name of the data. However, again, this gives us the whole object, the whole image with all the attributes, and we just want the ID. So we're going to access the ID attribute and set it to AMI. And before we do that, let's actually output the result of this query so that we can test whether our filter criteria are set correctly and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do output, and let's call it AWS AMI, and the value, or AWS AMI ID, and value is going to be this one right here. Or we can also output the whole object actually. So I'm going to do Terraform plan first. And Terraform plan will actually give us the outputs object with all the attributes or the values that we get from AWS. So in this case, Terraform actually fetched the data, and we see the results here without executing the apply. So we see the whole AWS AMI object attributes here. So we see a bunch of attributes like creation date, description, and this actually matches the description right here. These are our filters, and we have the ID as well as image ID, which is the same value. We have the image location, owner, name as we filtered basically, and so on. So we have a bunch of values here, but we're just interested in ID. However, with output is how you can actually validate what result you're getting with this data execution. So I'm gonna add ID here, and let's do Terraform plan again. And this time I get just the ID. And this is actually with 0E9, the ID right here. So we're actually getting the correct AMI back from AWS. This is the one here. Great. So with that configured, let's comment this in again. So we have the first required attribute, which is AMI.